very serious, both of them. Okay, so let's start. So if you look at the slide over there, I think this is a nice way to introduce what we're talking about. It's one of the things we're discussing in the blockchain workshop at UTS is, is technology neutral? And of course, the answer must be it's never neutral. Technology is designed by people who have values and interests, and therefore, who owns and governs a technical infrastructure is going to be very much determining what kind of practices can happen. Not fully, because we can also change it as users, but there is within the architectures that we're using in social media, there are very strong values embedded, and I just want to get quickly over that. So you have a vertical axis and a horizontal one. The vertical divides up centralized versus distributed approaches to peer-to-peer, and that may sound contradictory, but I will explain. And then the horizontal line is for profit versus for benefit approaches. Why are you doing it for? So that gives us 4 quadrants, and the left upper quadrant brings us into that contradiction of a centralized P2P infrastructure. And the example here would be Facebook, where 1.5 billion people can permissionlessly interact between themselves. They can self-organize, they can find missing cats, organize a revolution in Europe, and massively organize migration patterns like they're doing now. The Syrian migration using secret Facebook groups to know where they have to go, what borders are open, what borders are closed, where they can sleep, what trains and buses to take. This is all self-organized in a peer-to-peer way. But then if you look at the back end of Facebook, it's very clearly not peer-to-peer. We don't decide on the design, we don't own our data, we get nothing from the monetization of the platform. So that's typically a netarchical platform, the hierarchy of the network. Behind what obviously seems like a peer-to-peer network and has real peer-to-peer effects, we do have centralized infrastructures. And of course, they are owned by private players. This is quite problematic because what you see is that these platforms would have no value without user inputs, and yet no monetization is reinvested in these community dynamics. So we have what we call a crisis of value in our society, where more and more people are producing use value themselves directly and exchanging or giving it in their communities. The capacity to monetize this is only growing linearly and is captured by these platforms. So we now have a form of capitalism where Uber no longer produces cars, but let us, drivers and users, exchange rides. We have Airbnb, which no longer produces hospitality, but allows us to exchange and sell rooms. We have Google, which no longer produces documents, but lives off our exchange of documents, etc., etc. Then we go down. This is what the blockchain workshop is about. You probably know what the blockchain is. So it's the universal ledger, which is attached to the Bitcoin currency. And there's a big dream today, which is that we can use this blockchain to self-organize automatically. Like you have a community, you set a few rules, you embed that in the software, and then basically all the transactions and exchanges will be automatically regulated by software. So that in theory would allow a lot of people, even more than today, to self-organize. But if you think about Bitcoin, the whole politics of Bitcoin, they are anarcho-capitalist, Austrian economics. So they're really based on the idea that everybody should be a commodity trader. Everybody should be a little property owner. And it's designed, Bitcoin, for example, is designed as a rent extraction scheme where it's easy to get in the beginning. And then the supply grows slower than the demand, which the values go up so the people who are early players can then extract income from the people who come after them. So very clearly, this is value laden. You can think this is a good thing, but you cannot deny that this is a certain value system that is embedded in the technology. Now the blockchain is a bit different, even though it's attached to blockchain, to the Bitcoin currency, but it's still kind of based on this fundamental idea that we're all separated and atomized individuals. There's no society, there's no community, and we just enter into transactions with one another. This is a very restricted view of human life that is embedded in the blockchain. And the big question we are discussing in the other university is whether we can also use it for other things, like community self-organization and community-owned assets, and community-owned shares and co-ops and all of that thing. And that's not going to be an obvious thing, but I think it's worth disembedding, if you like, the blockchain as a potential from the politics in which it's originally embedded. So that's still an open question whether we can do that, but that's what we're discussing for 4 days. Okay, then we move to the right. Maybe it's not the right direction, but it's like that on the slide. So we have today an exponential rise in non-corporate and non-state initiatives all over the world. The statistics in the Netherlands were shown by Tine de Moor in Homo Corporans, where you see a slow growth of civic initiatives from 1980 to 2005, and then an exponential rise. This is happening in Australia. I got a makerspace map on Footscray. I counted 70 red dots, and this is just one suburb. You add co-working, makerspaces, fab labs, 3D printing facilities, food networks, renewable energy networks, co-ops, and you'll be amazed at how many people are engaged today in changing the rules of the game at the local level, enabled by technology. This is important not to forget. Bike sharing, tried many, many times, wasn't working because of the tragedy of the Commons, people stealing bikes, and the old non-technological system were not able to manage it. Today, with geolocation chips, we now have 4,000 bike sharing schemes with up to 400,000 bikes in some Chinese cities. It's very much related to the emergence of P2P technology. This is not an accident. So if Luther said in the 15th century, thank God for the printing press, because up until that time, all the heretics had been destroyed, and he could grow faster to the printing press and they could repress the spread of the idea, then I would argue today we have this enormous potential to do the same using the networks. And I see two kind of phases. The first phase from 1973, the invention of the microchip, until 1993, the invention of the World Wide Web and its browser. The first phase of private networks controlled by multinationals, which gave us neoliberal globalization, because they could reorganize supply chains on the global level. And then a second phase after 93, in which these networks become civic in part and allow an enormous amount of self-organization to take place. Of course, also other things like surveillance, the other side, the evil twin of the same technology, but certainly that potential is there. It has been used. It's not like an utopia, it's there. Which brings me to the last quadrant. So this is really for benefit oriented, but with a global vision. I'd like to use the example of Enspiral in New Zealand. I'm very much into looking at what I call post-corporate forms. So basically the idea that we have today a system that's based on extractive business practices. You have natural resources, human resources, and the question for investors is how can we maximize the extraction of value from this? And so typically in a market exchange, we look at our own benefit, we don't look at externalities. So we've created a world in which the climate and the planet is in danger, and in which social inequality is rising faster and faster. Can we move to another vision, another practice in which investors, entrepreneurs, which is the same people who create the commons, can think differently about their business practice, which is, can we create forms that generate that are generative vis-a-vis the environment and the social communities in which we are embedded. So can we co-create value as we co-create commons and shared resources? So we now have examples of this, like Inspiral in New Zealand, Las Indias in Spain, Sensorica in Canada, the Ethos Foundation in the UK. And there's a French book with an English subtitle, which is called Core-to-Core, Peer-to-Peer, which shows how this is happening at a massive scale in ethnic and religious communities globally. Just to give you an example, if you go to any European city with more than 40,000 people, you see Ecuadorian indigenous people making new age pan flute music and selling llama wool. This is a file, a business ecosystem that generates 1/3 of GDP in Otavalo province. If you go to the beaches in Greece and Spain and Italy, and you see African people selling maybe not so authentic Prada bags, then there are Senegalese Sufi brotherhoods that generate an enormous amount of value. It's actually impossible to marry in Senegal if you haven't done this. So young men of Otavalo and Senegal participate in this file, the business ecosystem, trans migrants that generates value that they reinvest in their communities. And so I see Enspiral as India's in the same way, but they are peer-to-peer based, commons-based files, not companies. They're business ecosystems that generate value for commons in their communities. And so I think this is very exciting, and people like General Orsi are the ones enabling and facilitating this on the legal and governance and ownership levels. And people like Serenity are the people in the mud actually creating these structures on the ground, in this case for food. Right. I'm talking fast because I only have 30 minutes. So this is what we need to change, right? So here is how peer production works. It's a triartical system based on 3 new human institutions. The core of value creation today is no longer private people, workers, entrepreneurs creating value in the marketplace. It's citizens contributing to open and shared resources. Open contributory systems. So we have productive communities creating Wikipedia, Linux, Arduino, Wiki House, Wikispeed, Artisat, etc., which are systems of contributions. People, paid or unpaid, create a shared resource. Now, obviously, in our world, we have to make a living. We have to buy food and shelter and these things. So logically, as soon as these systems reaches a level of maturity, they will look at ways to create livelihoods around these common resources. And the standard way to do it is the extractive way. The open source software economy is largely a normal capitalist economy with extractive business structures, creating livelihoods, but which means that in this case you're a commoner contributing to a shared resource, but in order to survive, you have to become either an entrepreneur or a worker in the sphere of capital, right? So if we look at this, then we can compare it to the emergence of capitalism in the 18th century. We had a putting out system. So in the early stages, capital had capital, but not enough. So what they were doing is buying the machines, buying the raw material, and selling it to the crafts workers. So in other words, the new system was still dependent on the old system. It couldn't reproduce itself within its own logic. Then in 1834, you had the labor laws, the poor laws as they were called. So the basic income was abolished, and people could no longer survive in any way except by selling their labor. And there you have it, a fully integrated capital system where labor and life is now commodity. So the big question for us, if we like the new system, if we like peer production and commons-based peer production, is, can we turn entrepreneurship into a commons-oriented form or a commons-supported form? So that's the idea of a generative ethical entrepreneurial coalition, which would replace the netarchical forms that are dominant today. So, oops, that's the same. So how would this work? Well, let's look at Enspiral. So Enspiral pretty much fits that model. So Enspiral works around a series of commons. The one I know are Lumio, an open source democratic decision-making system for virtual communities, which we use in the P2P Foundation. So it's very difficult to make decisions when people are working without a hierarchy in different countries, different places at the same time. And Lumio does that for us. So it's a system which allows, first of all, structured discussions, and then you have a choice between decision-making protocols. Consensus -1, consent, lazy majority, supermajority. So they have various forms. So in other words, you choose your own governance form. Co-budgeting is their commons for reinvesting surplus within the network, within the commons, if you like, which is also an open source software that we're starting to use. So that's the commons of Enspiral. Enspiral itself is an entrepreneurial coalition. It's not a business. It has 18 different social entrepreneurial business. And social entrepreneurship, like fair trade, is a generative business form. Of course, you can cheat with it, and then it's not the case. We know that 70% of fair trade is not really fair trade. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of so-called social entrepreneurs is not really social entrepreneurs. But if we do it in an authentic way, social entrepreneurship is about creating a sustainable flow of income so that you can continue to solve a problem, right? So Inspiral is stuff that matters. Social entrepreneurs that try to solve environmental, social issues, but create an income stream so they can do this without begging for money, like philanthropy or any other form. The third aspect of Enspiral is the Enspiral Foundation, which is the For Benefit Association. I'd like to say a little word about that because it's a very important new logic. But classic NGO thinks the same way about the world than a classic enterprise. It's a scarcity-based world. We have civil wars, people don't have access to medicine, so we, Doctors Without Borders, are going to fundraise resources, and we're going to direct them to solve that issue. If we look at Enspiral Foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation, the Linux Foundation, it's not at all what they're doing. There is a problem, or something we want to construct, a universal encyclopedia, a sustainable car, a sustainable building open platform like Wiki House. So that's the goal, the object of cooperation. And these for benefit associations, they are enabling and empowering the cooperation to occur on a stable, sustainable basis. So they are not, it's not a hierarchy commanding the work. It's an enabling mechanism looking at the infrastructure that are needed for this cooperation to occur over the long term. So the Wikimedia Foundation typically fundraises the funds for the servers so that people can continue to write and use the Wikipedia, but it doesn't direct the work within the Wikipedia sphere. Interesting, and I noticed I took the wrong slide, so I'll just explain it, but go back to here to these three spheres that we see. This is a new social model. This is a new society. Just replace everything. So peer production is the sphere of civil society. Civil society has become productive because citizens are enabled to contribute permissionlessly to the creation of common resources. So it's no longer non-profit, non-governmental, derivative. It is directly productive of social value. So we now have a productive civil society, which is the core of value creation. Second level, the entrepreneurial coalition can become generative, can become ethical. This means reintegrating the externalities that capitalism externalizes. It's very important to make a difference between the market and capitalism. The market is a scarcity allocation system. We can be for or against it, but that's what it does through the pricing mechanism. But capitalism is a scarcity engineering system, right? It's illegal now for farmers in most of the world to use their own seeds. If you buy a tractor as a farm in the US, a John Deere tractor, you don't own the tractor because it's considered a piece of software and it's illegal to change the IP. These are mechanisms to create artificial scarcities, and I think Jamel Orsi has done a lot of work on identifying those in the past. So sharing is not easy. Sharing is explicitly made difficult through our legal and governance systems that are dominant today. The difference today is that these entrepreneurial coalitions, they can do that themselves, right? So instead of having a state that only regulates from the outside because the market is amoral, if not immoral, then in this new reality, because these entrepreneurs are codependent of the same commons, they can start working together on multiple levels. So it's not that there is no competition anymore, but the competition is derivative of the cooperation instead of the other way around, right? In a classic capitalist model, we have teams like sport teams, corporations, each fighting against each other. Within the corporation, you have cooperation, hierarchical cooperation mostly, sometimes horizontal cooperation, but the cooperation is subsumed to the competition. In the new model, we have cooperation at the basis because we all codependent on the shared resource, which we have to maintain collectively in order to be strong and wealthy. Therefore, the cooperation is the basis and competition happens within the sphere of that underlying cooperation, right? So this is a very different economic model. Thirdly, and this is where it becomes interesting, if you look at the for benefit associations, the third circle, they could be seen as a model of the state, a partner state, a partner city. So we look at the Bologna regulation for the care and regeneration of the urban commons. It's not politics as usual, because any neighborhood collective in Bologna can propose changes to the streets and the neighborhoods. There's a review process and there's a negotiation between the city and the collective on how to enable and empower this neighborhood improvement to occur. This is a revolution in politics, because it's not a public service produced by the state and then consumed by the citizens. Is the citizens being at the origin of policy and the state as a facilitating mechanism. So this is the way we view this at the P2P Foundation. And our work consists, that's a new slide, of trying to find enabling mechanisms to do this faster and easier. So today we have three systemic problems in our system. It's not sustainable, it's not fair, and it's not open and shared. So what we have is millions of people today working on this, right? Remember David Korten, Bless the Unrest, 2 million organizations in the world are already working on sustainability. That's a lot. In most countries in the world, the solidarity economy, the cooperative economy, the social entrepreneurial economy, the non-profit economy is 10–15% already and growing. And then we have the open and shared models, which are also growing exponentially. And the fair use economy report in the US calculated that the economy of shared resources is 1/6 of GDP and 70 million workers in 2011 and growing. So what's the problem is that they are happening, but they are not happening in any coordinated or integrated fashion. Even within one field, let's take the solidarity economy. I was in Italy. The consumer-supported agricultural groups are booming exponentially, but they have 13 different ordering systems in just one country. This is a big problem that Uber and Airbnb do not have, right? So one of the things we need to work on is how do we defragment the ethical entrepreneurial activities. And so we have two notions here. One is open cooperativism, which is about the convergence between ethical business models and the sharing of knowledge. And the other project is called Open Source Circle Economy, which is about the convergence of circular economy models and shared models. Let me give you an example why this is so interesting at the level of sustainability. And Bronner, you have to stop me. How much minutes? 5. Okay, let's do this very fast. So this is a typical industrial object in our society. 38% of this glass is rent to the financial system. So everything we buy today, we are paying 38% to the financial world. Everything. Second, everything we use is designed to fail and to break down, right? Planned obsolescence is not a bug, it's a feature. And it's normal. If you design for scarcity, for the market, you have to maintain that scarcity. So nobody's going to use the lamp that is burning in Los Alamos since 1903, because any company would do that would go bankrupt. So how do we do this? Well, what we can do is we can design in open design communities. If we design in open design communities, we do not design for scarcity, we do not design planned obsolescence, we design for sustainability. Not because we're green, not because we're kind-hearted, just because that's the way it works in an open design community. So you look at Wiki House. I spent the whole morning with them in Christchurch about 4 or 5 days ago. You may think this is just about building a house with a few people. No, no, this is an open platform for sustainable building. All the knowledge about how to make healthy housing is embedded in the production system of Wiki House, right? So you look at the situation in New Zealand, 70% of the housing is substandard and is plagued by mold, making many people sick through mold infection. The classic reply of the real estate sector is to isolate the houses. But because they use toxic material, this means that all the chemicals that emanate from the paint, from the varnish, from the construction material is trapped in your house. So this is the choice we have today, right? It's not a very interesting choice. When you look at Wiki House, all of that is eliminated from the ground up. So this is where we have to go. We have to create these open platforms for sustainable production, and we need to make sure that we have the 3 elements in the system: free, fair, and sustainable at the same time. There's a little problem for this. We have no funding to do this. You can find funding in the solidarity economy. You can find funding from venture capital by opening up knowledge. You can find funding for sustainable projects in the blue economy, etc. Well, you cannot find funding if you do the 3 at the same time. So if Wiki House goes to the Triodos Bank, they will ask for intellectual property, believe it or not. That's one big issue we need to solve. Okay, so I'm concluding. I'm concluding with the argument that this is not just a thing about doing our own stuff. This is about politics as well. I was reminded some time ago that just before the French Revolution, 10,000 farmers were executed for wearing illegal textiles. Just as today, grandmothers are fined $300,000 for playing Happy Birthday on YouTube. We are a bit more advanced. We don't kill people for that anymore. But just to show you, this is politics, right? It's not just a question of retreating in our lifeboats and doing good stuff. We are facing a governance and ownership system which makes that very difficult. So here's some good things that are happening. In Melbourne, and I hope some people here can join them, we are launching a Commons Transition Coalition. These are, and I think Serenity, I hope she smiles, means that she's on it. Yeah, she's on it. Is an idea of bringing all these good people together to create a voice and a set of proposals that can change the policies, for example, at the city level. So I advocate assemblies of the commons, citizens that are concerned with shared resources, chambers of the commons for the ethical entrepreneurs, and commons transition circles for the most motivated into actually changing the world in that direction. Another pivot, and I'll end with that, is around technology. just about a few weeks ago, we had the birth of the Collaborative Technology Alliance. Very important. Until now, we've done the hacker strategy, which is basically let's do the same, but in a different way. And so we have all these hackers competing with Facebook. And believe me, I've been there several times, and I never find anyone there. So that's a bit of a problem. So I think this is not the right strategy. The right strategy is doing what Enspiral is doing with about a dozen other ethical entrepreneurial coalitions, which is let's make our systems that we already use and that express those values in their design, let's combine them, make them interoperable. That's how we're going to win this war of value-sensitive design, not by competing with Facebook. And I use an analogy, maybe it's not the right one, but I speak to people because most of you have experienced this. So it's not working out in your couple. And here's the thing, as long as you're fighting, you love each other. The moment you stop fighting, your relationship is dead. It means you're looking for somebody else, you lost hope. So this is what we're doing. We have more and more people thinking, we can't reform this. It's the root itself is, a wrong DNA. We are walking on our head. We think nature is abundant, we have infinite growth in a finite natural system, and then we make abundant things artificially scarce. So you can't reform this. Maybe that guy can walk on his shoulders instead of his head. It's not going to make enough of a difference. So we need to rebuild, as what Mr. Phillips said, from the ground up with the right DNA. This is what we have to do today. And then we have to organize around that, to defend ourselves, to promote the right conditions at the social and economic level to make that a thriving expansion of the commons economy. And so thank you so much for coming here, for inviting me, and thanks so much to Janelle and Serenity. So I'll forgive you for the gender imbalance on this panel for once in the other situation. Because people have been doing so many things, and believe it or not, we have a project on the P2P Foundation. It's called 100 Women Are Co-Constructing the Commons Economy. It's not a male thing, believe me. It's really a transition that is really drawing on everyone to make it work.